Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. All right, it's that time of the year where we got to start thinking about what the Browns' draft positioning is going to be here, right? I thought this was one of the few games left on the Browns' schedule that they had the chance to win. And given how the offense looks, we really got to consider, like, hey, where are the Browns going to be if they don't win another game for the rest of the season? Where are they going to be if they win out? Where are they going to be if they just win one more game? And how does that change the Browns' draft positioning? So, unfortunately, this is the conversation we're having, but this can turn into a fortunately if this leads to the Browns getting a playmaker like a Mason Graham, like an Abdul Carter, right? Somebody who can add to a already solid defense and kind of take that defense so over the top that this puts them at a place to where they can get away with a lot of quarterback. Or maybe if you're somebody who likes one of these quarterbacks in the first round, this can help the Browns get those guys. Me personally, I'm not first round go out and get anybody guy this year. I think round 3 is where I start looking for quarterbacks this year because I think that's just where the talent pool is. But round 1, round 2, I want to take best player available. We'll look at what those options are going forward as this week continues. But let's see how this week lined out, what that means for the Browns draft position. So the Browns lost this game, but a big thing happened here, right? The Vegas Raiders won. Now, the Raiders went from the 2 pick from losing today to now the 6 pick. The reason this is important is if you're the Browns, you want as many teams that need a quarterback to be behind you as possible. Because these are teams that could basically want to trade up to get a quarterback, and you could trade back if you're not interested in quarterback. If you're a Browns fan that is interested in quarterback, then this matters too. If you're a Browns fan who wants like Abdul Carter specifically, you might want the top 2 teams to get quarterbacks, right? But I'm just going to posit this theory. I have a hard time believing that both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders go in the top 5 of the draft, right? I think one of them might, but both of them, I don't know. Now, New York here, they look pretty set to get the number 1 overall pick. If we fast forward to next week, right? So let's look at next week's games. New York plays, who's New York play? The Colts, which is a winnable game for them. And then they play the Eagles, which they're not going to beat that game. So they are definitely at best going to be a 3-win team, in my opinion. They seem locked in to that number 1 overall spot, or they could win a game and it could become free-for-all. So we'll walk through that scenario too. But let's go through next week, right? Let's go through some of these games. We'll just pick some guys here. And remember, we're really just focused on the bottom of the AFC and the NFC here. So we're not really too concerned with some of these bigger games, right? The Chiefs versus the Steelers. We'll just pick the Chiefs here. Let's go with Ravens here. And then Broncos versus the Bengals. We could just pick the Broncos here. You could pick the Bengals. It doesn't really change anything, right? Because the Bengals aren't anywhere near the Browns draft positioning. All right, so we got the Chargers versus the Patriots. And then we got another one here, the Titans versus the Jaguars. Both these teams look pretty bad right now. And the Jets versus the Buffalo Bills. Let's assume Buffalo wins that one. Obviously, Browns, Miami. And then you got the big one here, New York, Indianapolis. And then you got another winnable game here for the Raiders versus the New Orleans Saints. So based on how next week goes, right, it is really going to determine a lot about the Browns' future draft positioning and what their strategies are going to be. This is run through the AFC and the NFC. The Seahawks are going to win here. The Rams probably beat the Cardinals. And then the Falcons versus Washington. How many wins does Washington have? How many wins does the Falcons have? Let's give that one to the Falcons. Make it interesting here. Well, I think they'll probably take that one. And then here. All right, so let's look at the games that are interesting, right? Patriots versus Chargers. We all think that the Chargers are probably winning that game. That's an easy one to settle in there. Not Broncos. Buccaneers versus the Carolina Panthers. It's a pretty safe bet that the Carolina Panthers are going to lose that game. All right. So now we go into these 4 games. Now let's say the Titans win, the Colts win, and the Saints win, and the Browns win. Well, then the Browns jump all the way to the 8th pick in the draft. Now, if the Browns lose and all of that happens, they stay at the 4th pick. If the Jaguars win, nothing changes, right? If the Giants win, Browns move to the 3rd pick. If the Raiders win, they stay there, right? But look at the 2 teams ahead. Titans, Patriots. Now, I don't get the read that the Titans are going to take a quarterback in the top 5. Patriots aren't. So the Browns could get there at 3 with both the quarterback teams behind them, which means potentially the Giants would want to trade up. The Raiders would definitely want to trade up. And you would still stay within the top 10, which is important here, right? Now, let me go with what I actually think is going to happen. Probably the Titans win here. And then I think if the Browns offense looks anything like it did last week, it's going to probably be the Miami Dolphins. And then probably have to say the Colts could win there. And the Raiders, I think they've won their last game here. So, boom. That scenario plays out. What I think is going to happen, that's what goes in. We'll come back to this week, play around with it a little bit here as well. All right. So now let's go to week 18. We go to week 18. We look at some of these games. Okay, Chargers, Raiders. You're going to take the Chargers here. Chiefs, Broncos. Probably take the Chiefs here. You got Titans, Texans. Probably going to take the Texans there. All right, this is one that's a toss-up. Jaguars, Colts. Bengals, Steelers. I take the Steelers there now that the division is in play for Pittsburgh. They have to win here, and the same thing is true for Baltimore, so I'm going to take Baltimore here in the game where they have to win, right? Because this game pretty much determines the division, because if the Steelers and Ravens both win, the Ravens get the division, but if the Browns win, the Steelers get the division, so they both need to play. Yeah, both teams need to play. Depending on how they structure these games, too, will depend on if starters play for any of these teams, right? Because if the Browns play at 1 o'clock and they put the Steelers-Bengals game at 4 o'clock and the Browns lose, then it doesn't really matter what the Steelers do here, right? They just switch from 6 to 5 seed, so it doesn't really change much, right? They can't win the division. So if they make the Browns play at 4 o'clock and they put the Bengals game here, then the Steelers are going to have to play their starters. And then the Browns are going to have to play the Ravens starters here. Unless the Bengals beat the Steelers, then there's no way that the Steelers can win the division. So we'll see how the NFL tries to put that one out there, right? Because they're gonna use the league to get max drama. But let's just assume both the good teams in the division beat the bad teams in the division. All right. Patriots, Bills. Is there a reason for the Bills not to play starters? There is. So the Bills might not play starters, but the Patriots, they were kind of close this week. So let's call this one a toss-up right now. All right. We're going to call that one a toss-up. We don't know. Miami versus the Jets. We'll just say Miami's going to win that one here. And Miami would end the season at what? 9-8. All right. Move over to the NFC side. Rams. 49ers. You take that there. Green Bay. And then now we're talking about Washington versus Dallas. Probably Washington. Probably Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. Detroit Lions, right? Detroit Lions, it's a toss-up, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't really affect us. All right, and then you have the Panthers playing the Falcons. Now, if the Panthers win, then they will be the 9th pick in the draft. If the Panthers lose, then they're like the 6th pick in the draft. And then Giants, Eagles, don't think that the Giants are winning that one. So if this pans out, right, let's say the Browns lose out, then the Browns draft positioning comes down to this game. If the Bills win, the Browns will be the third pick. If the Patriots win, then the Browns will be the second pick. But the way, also this Jaguars game, right? Because I think if the Jaguars lose, they jump the Browns. So Jaguars game, Colts game, going to be very important, right? See what happens in front of them, because those are the two games that swing the Browns' draft position. If you look down here, right? So Jaguars win, and the Patriots win, and the Browns get the second pick of the draft. If the Bills win and the Colts win, then the Browns get the fourth pick in the draft, right? I think the Giants are pretty much a lock here, but let's go back to last week and say that the Giants pull off a mild upset and get to 3 wins. Now, how does that change week 18? All right, let's say the same scenario, right? These two games. Well, if the Jaguars win, then they're going to leave the Browns out of it. If the Patriots win, then they're going to move out the Browns' way, and the Browns will have the number 1 overall pick in this scenario. So that's what will have to unfold if you want the Browns to have the number 1 overall pick. If that's what you want, we could debate about that. I'm not really super hungry for the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, but if that's what you want, the Browns could get the number 1 overall pick. It would be that easy. But let's say the Browns win a game here, right, in this scenario. So let's say this breaks the Browns' way, but the Browns win a game. Then they jump to the 8th pick, right? So they're going to be in the top 10 no matter what, but they could be anywhere from 1 to 8. Let's see what happens if the Browns win out. Yeah, 9. 9's the highest they can go, right? So if they win out, 9's about the highest they can go, unless Dallas. How many wins does Dallas have right now? Because Dallas is the next team up. Yeah, Dallas Saints. The Browns are not catching them win-loss record-wise. So, yeah, well, the Saints lose here. The Browns have the head-to-head. And then the Dallas Cowboys, if they lose out, which I do think I have them losing out. Yeah, I have the Cowboys losing out here at 6. So, yeah, the Browns will be from 1 to 9. 1 to 9 for sure. Let's be real here. They're not beating the Baltimore Ravens. I think the only game they have left that they can kind of win is against the Miami Dolphins. And if they beat the Dolphins, they would be a 4-win team. And in order to get a better pick, I think they would have to have a bunch of these teams win. So Browns can be anywhere from 9 to 8 here, right? Let's see. Is there a winnable game here for the Patriots? Let's say the Patriots win that game and the Browns win one more game. Then, yeah, you move up to 7, right? They would be basically inching their way, because if you see how this is lined out, the Browns are, as far as strength of schedule goes, they have 5.26. And that is the 3rd highest amongst the sea of garbage 3-win teams that we have right now. So in order for the Browns to win out these tiebreakers, they need a bunch of teams to win. And that's how it would go. Let's see, if there's, because the Jaguars get the 4 wins, but if the Titans, if they beat the Titans next week, right, then all of a sudden that changes where the Browns sit. So let's say if the Browns get the 4 wins, what's the earliest that they can go to? Let's play that game real quick. And then you need the Bears to win on Thursday night. And I believe you would need that. And then also you would need the Colts you need that. Yeah. So if the Browns win one more game, the highest they could probably get is the 6th pick. Be interesting because they'd be right in front of the Raiders still. But if the Browns lose out, let's go back to that Miami game. Browns lose out, they'd be the 4th pick. Let's see what the highest pick the Browns could have if they lose out. So let's say the Giants don't win a game. The Patriots don't win a game. I got that in there, right? Yeah, the Giants don't win a game. The Patriots don't win a game. The Titans don't win a game. What happens there, right? Like, how high can the Browns fall? I think 4 is about as high as you can get. And then, yeah, so if the Browns lose out, their max pick would probably be around 4, probably 5. And if they have things fall their way, they can easily get to the number 1 overall pick. Now, what you do when you get there is a whole nother conversation, right? But I do think everybody needs to have an open mind about what the Browns could or could not do there, because a lot of options are on the table. If you want to build on your strength and just get talented players in the draft, I'm always for that strategy, right? I think the draft is for talent acquisition. I think free agency is for addressing needs, right? If you need to address some needs, go at it in free agency. If you need to get more talent on your roster, that is what the draft is for, specifically getting the number 1 overall pick. Now, if you get the number 1 overall pick, you could be tempted to get Shedeur Sanders. You could be tempted to try to solve your quarterback problem in one whiff, but I don't know if that's a prospect that can save your quarterback problem. And I don't know if that's something that the Browns would want to do. So we'll see here, right? But if I'm the Browns, this is where you're sitting. If they don't win another game, they'll probably be in the top 5. And if you're sitting in the top 5, I mean, you can just do the math. You're probably going to get Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, if that's where you're looking at. One of those 3 top prospects in this draft class falling to you at that draft position. And that would be very helpful to a Cleveland Browns defense that's already pretty good, that could use an extra young player, another young playmaker, and maybe a great defense helps your offense, especially when you can address running back in round 3 and maybe quarterback and left tackle in free agency. So we'll see how the Browns go about it, but that's what the draft order looks like for the Browns. It's looking very likely that the Browns finish the season 3 of 14 or 4 of 13. It's a massive disappointment for this team. It's not even an inverse of last year's record. It's worse. But the upside to finishing that badly is that you're going to get a really good pick in a draft with some really talented players. The reason I wanted to make this video is because I see a lot of Browns fans, especially like when it comes to Shedeur Sanders and like seriously evaluating him as somebody that the Browns should or should not take, or other players, Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, kind of default to, well, they won't be there when he gets here, or, oh, they don't want to come here. But I'm like, nah, man, we might have the number 1 overall pick. We could have a top 4 pick in the draft. We need to understand that literally everybody on the draft board can be an option for the Cleveland Browns. And we need to be open-minded enough to understand that, yeah, the Browns could draft Shedeur. Yeah, the Browns could draft Cam Ward. Like, they might not be prohibited because of their draft positioning to get any of these guys, which means we got to really be serious about, or at least the Browns have to really be serious about what they do want or don't want going forward. Just something to think about, right? Because now that the draft is a real thing, now that the Browns picking in the top 5 feels like a very real thing. Hey, man, like, you might have had a take earlier in this year about Shedeur Sanders that you might want to reevaluate just to make sure you right on, right? Because if you the Browns, you pass up on what people think is the number 1 quarterback in this draft, you better be sure. Like, I know I'm brushing up. I'm about to watch every game that Shedeur has played to make sure that I feel the way that I feel about him, even after watching all of that. Like, this ain't the time to just assume, man. Like, you could be in position to take literally anybody in this draft class. If you got a hot take about not wanting Travis Hunter, you better look at that. You better be sure. Like, you better be sure about that. And honestly, like, it's one thing for fans to like have an understanding when you're gonna have these conversations, because these conversations are gonna happen. But it's really also like, hey, if you're the Browns front office, like, I hope they understand what time it is. Like, hope they weren't like kind of doing this whole thing that fans were doing where they're like not really taking the ideal of getting Shedeur seriously because they didn't think he could fall to him. Now, it's very real that you could have a chance to get him. You need to know, like, do you think he's good or not? He's a polarizing prospect. It's not guaranteed that everybody thinks the same way about him, right? I know people who look at the film, love him. I know people who look at the film, have major concerns. So that's really why I want to make this video, is to kind of make it real to everybody. Hey, this is where the Browns are likely to be picking. Like, they're likely to be picking at least in the top 7, if not in the top 5. And if they look like they did against the Bengals the last 2 games, they're going to be in the top 4. So, and let me circle back to Shedeur Sanders here, because that is the one prospect that at least there has been a clamoring of online scouts, at least, that think that he could be a franchise quarterback. Now, I haven't necessarily been there with that, but if you're the Browns, if you're a Browns fan, you should want to be sure, because the idea of having to pass on him is a real one. And if you do pass on the one quarterback in this class that people believe will be good or has a chance to be good, a better than average chance, you got to be sure that you don't think that that guy works for you. Because if you miss, add it to the list, right? We're already bemoaning Baker Mayfield 24/7, right? We're already bemoaning the Deshaun Watson trade 24/7. Do you really want to add not taking Shedeur Sanders? And again, I know somebody's going to respond. Shedeur's family's never going to let him play here. His family is not going to say no to being a top 5 pick. He will go where he is drafted, in the top 5. Now, if he falls out the top 5, out the top part of the first round, then maybe that stuff becomes a factor where it doesn't matter as much where he lands because the money is not that different. But in the top 5, he's taking the top 5. He's going to go where he's drafted, right? That's just going to be what it's going to be. I do not care about Deion Sanders' role in this, because solving the quarterback problem for the Cleveland Browns is the number one priority. The question is, do you think that guy as a prospect, not as a personality, not because you don't like that his dad gonna be around? No, if you don't believe in that guy as a prospect, that's where everybody needs to get to. Because right now, all the conversation about Shedeur Sanders, whether you're for him or against him, is half-ass. It's all about swag and all this other bullshit. We need to really know, what's this dude as a prospect? Like, straight up. And is this guy, if we pass on him, are we going to regret it? That's all I'm asking. Every time I bring up Shedeur, it's always somebody to comment. It become a war in there, but we really need to think about that. The draft, it's getting real. It's getting real for the Cleveland Browns. Let me know what you think. Peace.